For half a century, WJPZ Syracuse has been the greatest media classroom on the planet.
We've trained students from the 1970s to the 2020s on how to run a professional radio station.
But the lessons learned and relationships formed go far beyond studios and transmitters.
Taking a look back through the eyes of those who experienced it.
This is WJPZ at 50.
Welcome to WJPZ at 50. I am John Jagay. I'm joined today by a name who's come up in the podcast several times, and I'm excited to get to know him now. We're friends on LinkedIn, but actually really having a first in-depth conversation today. We've been yakking since before I hit the record button, so we're going to get into it. He is Tim Swartz. He is from the class of 2009. If you are not watching the video on YouTube, he has his Z89 sweatshirt on and the Carmelo Anthony Sweet Victory Sports Illustrated behind him. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thank you. I mean, first of all, I'm scared that my names come up. That's usually not a good thing. I do too. Like, maybe I can get my wife to watch this because I have like a box of old T-shirts and sweatshirts that I have never worn for like 15 years. I went through it the other day, and then I was like, oh, I saw a Z89 sweatshirt. So this is getting worn for the first time in like 15 years.
And shout out to, I believe it was David Resnick that connected us, right?
Yeah, shout out. David knows everybody. David is actually, shout out to my wife, married to one of my wife's best friends. They met at our wedding. So,
oh, wow.
I don't know if has he been a guest?
He has, but it's been a couple of years since I interviewed him, so I don't remember
he
all the
should have
details.
led with that he found his wife kind of through.
It does sound familiar.
Yeah.
All right. Well, today is about you, Tim. Tell me, you're a West Coast guy originally, how you ended up at Syracuse, and then how you ended up at Z89.
Yeah. I grew up in San Mateo, which is a little bit south of San Francisco.
Shout out Tom Brady.
I was about to say that. Tom went to the private high school, a couple blocks from my high school. But, I wanted to go like into radio. I loved radio growing up. I did a little bit of radio in high school. And I kind of, back then, I think it was Google, or maybe Ask Jeeves. I don't know. One of those websites, Yahoo. I looked it up, and the other thing is I grew up huge sports fan, and I was watching Syracuse on Big Monday. I'd see the Carrier Dome, and I visited a couple schools. And I think Syracuse kind of felt like it was the place I wanted to go to. And the other thing too, I always tell people is I love my parents, but I was like kind of ready to get away from the Bay Area. And I love the Bay Area. I live here now still, but I was ready for something different.
Okay, so you get to campus. So this would have been 2005. How did you end up finding the radio station?
I don't really remember. I'm like a general, I think I saw a flyer for like a general meeting in Shine, and I went. And the one thing I remember is they had all the speeches, and no offense to the U operations or music people, but I was kind of like, and the sports people came on, and then I kind of perked up, and I talked to the people that were in the sports department then, and I kind of felt a really good connection to them, and I came down, and that's how I got involved.
Who were some of the people in the sports department that were there when you arrived on campus?
Well, I think for everyone, it is kind of crazy to look back at what some of the people are doing. Dan Duba, he is the announcer for the Vegas Knights. I remember him. I remember Nick Friedel. I was like a producer on his show, and Nick's like on ESPN, or he was on ESPN covering the Warriors. Now he does the Athletic. Andrew Gundling was the sports director. Todd Robbins was the sports director. Those are some of the guys that I remember. This guy I ran into a few years ago. He was broadcasting for Washington State. Now he does NC State. Matt Chasnow. So there was a lot of great sports people that I was pretty lucky to meet right when I got to school.
Did you do any other AER and Citrus TV, or just the 89? Where were you media-wise on campus?
I did Citrus TV. I did not do AER. Somebody asked me about that. I don't know why I didn't do it. I think I just got so involved with Z89, I ended up not doing it. But I did Citrus TV, which then and then still now, they're right next to each other. So it was like convenient. I would go there and kind of go back and forth a bunch.
By the way, on this podcast, Tim, you don't have to apologize for not doing AER. We're good. We're plenty good with that here.
Yeah, I'm not apologizing. I'm just, I don't know why, but I was very happy to end up at Z89.
A little bit of a rivalry there.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get to the station, you meet all these people who are destined to be in the major leagues of various sports and networks. Tell me about your involvement and what you started doing at the station.
I think one of the things that's interesting about like looking back at it, and I think people are so competitive there, is I don't think I was much involved my freshman year. And then my sophomore year, I kind of came along a lot more and became more involved. I was talking to some students. I kind of randomly went back there recently. And, what you do your freshman year doesn't really matter. One of my best friends is my cousins.
Oh, yeah.
Who is, was on ESPN full time. He was 24, 25, and he wasn't involved in any student media as a freshman. So I got involved when I was a sophomore. At the end of my sophomore year, it used to be like a senior would be the sports director. But when I was there, the sports department had become pretty thin, and none of the juniors that were going to become seniors were interested in becoming sports director. We might have only had like one or two. So I was a sophomore, and they always hire a new sports director when lacrosse season's going to start. And I ended up becoming sports director when I was like 19 years old.
So this is spring of your sophomore year?
Yeah, spring of my son. I ended up doing it for 2 years, which was a lot, but it was a lot of fun.
We've had a handful of sports folks on the podcast, and I want to give sports guys their due because, as you alluded to earlier, we always have a running joke of a little bit of a, not only rivalry is too strong a word, but music and sports. Tell me about your tenure as sports director and some of the stuff that you were involved with doing.
Well, first, I want to tell a quick story. We had a music versus sports football, flag football, or touch football game.
That seems unfair.
And it was like at Thorndon.
Oh, yeah, Thorndon Park, yeah. Right by Haven, yep.
It was like started pretty friendly, and it got pretty... It wasn't heated, but the people were trying. It wasn't like people to jog. And I just remember, I'll never forget, one of the seniors said to me or like one of the other younger guys, they were like, "Hey, block." They're like, "Hey, do you know what a chop block is?" And we didn't have, no one was hurt. So when I was sports director, I think a few things, we had a really thin staff. So one of the things that I had to do was try to recruit people and kind of get more people involved. We got a couple people from the Daily Orange, a couple people from AER, because back then, talking to students, now everybody does like multiple places, but back then a lot of people were I was just AER, I was just Z89.
Yeah.
And I think for my age, a lot of our people were AER and Z89 that were radio. The first thing that I did is we kind of rebuilt the whole system. Things had kind of gotten a little loose in terms of our pregame, postgame, halftime. So it is wild. We called it Orange Women's Warm-Up. I really worked a lot with, especially my junior year, with Alex Silverman, who everybody knows Alex,
yep.
And David, and Joel Gadet and a couple other people. We worked to build like a system of, we would interview the home coach, Syracuse coach, the opposing coach. We would have features, and we're kind of building things from the ground up. The thing I think that was pretty special was there really wasn't any type of format. There was nothing. And we got to build something up, and I could not believe it. I went back to the state when I was back at the station in January, that a lot of the stuff that we had built was still being used. The other thing that was really important for me to do, that I think we just didn't have an archive. Like, we had nothing. We had some CDs that we were laying around, some old mini discs. And now when I went back, we have I think they have pretty much every broadcast since 2007 when we started.
Wow. So
that was another thing that I thought was super important, was building an archive for the history of the station, for various events. I think in athletics, men's sports had a really tough time. I mean, the football team won 10 games in 4 years I was there. Men's basketball team missed the tournament back-to-back years, which back then was unheard of. Now it's pretty normal.
I believe the class of 26 never saw the men's team in an NCAA tournament in their 4-year run, which is sad.
Yeah, it's that's too bad for them too, because it's so much fun. The tournament, the men's tournament, and then lacrosse missed the tournament entirely. The first time, like in 40 years, my sophomore or junior year.
Wow.
So, well, the men's sports were going down. We had a really incredible moment where, 2007, the women's lacrosse team won a NCAA tournament game. I think they were the first women's team to ever win a tournament game. 2008, women's lacrosse team went to the Final Four, first ever Final Four. The women's basketball team hired a new coach, and they were ranked for the first time in 2008, and they went to the NCAA tournament that year. So, for my time, women's sports at Syracuse, and really everything but football, men's basketball, and lacrosse, it had been treated like third or fourth class citizens, almost like they didn't exist.
Yeah.
And Daryl Gross got a lot of flack when he was at Syracuse, but he did an incredible job of bringing up all these different sports, where now Syracuse won national championship in field hockey, men's soccer. Now I'm kind of ranting and raving, but I was one of the people that was critical of Daryl on Z89. And when I was at school, but looking back, I think he did a really good job.
So a couple takeaways I have from the story you just told, Tim. So first off, in covering 55-ish years of this radio station, there are ebbs and flows where the staff is well-staffed and then it gets kind of thinned out. And so there's an innate sense, I think, throughout the years of when there's a thin staff, whether it's on the music side, the sports side, or the staff in general, that you've got to recruit, you've got to bring people and sort of keep that train rolling. So I think you spoke to that really well. And almost everybody listening knows Alex Silverman, knows him as having this incredible career in news. But he's a really knowledgeable sports fan too. And I think probably having him in station leadership was a really good partnership for you as the sports director.
Yeah, that's an incredible, great point. Alex started on the sports staff, which don't deny it, Alex, but he started on the sports staff.
He mentioned it in his podcast. He did.
Yeah. No, I'm just messing with him. And he was operations, right? He was operations, and that helped us because stuff was broken. And constantly. And we had to cancel some broadcasts. The start of my junior year, I'm like all fired up. We're going to do Friday Night Football. And week 1 got canceled because the station wasn't ready. But when Alex, especially, as you mentioned, he became general manager, it was a game changer for us because, at least in my knowledge, maybe there had been way a year before me, but recently it all been kind of music people as general managers. And Alex and then into Mike, back-to-back sports general managers, I'm sure they're still, their efforts are probably still being felt today because to have that was a really big help. When I started, Sean Scott was the general manager. He was great. He was awesome to me. But it is just different having a sports guy in charge.
You mentioned Mike Cousins earlier as well. He and I believe we overlapped for a year or two in Vermont. So shout out to Mike if you're listening.
That's right when he started. Yeah. And what's crazy is Mike, I think worked at like a call center when he was in Vermont too, and he was doing women's basketball. So I
wonder if he worked at Vermont Teddy Bear because I did that when I was working in radio in Vermont. I worked in their call center. I'll have to ask Mike about that. Shout out to Pajamagram, Calyx Flowers, and Vermont Teddy Bear. Okay. Now, back to you, Tim. You've had a really interesting career and a lot of different stops since graduation. So tell me about your time post-graduation.
Yeah, I always like to tell people this, and it's not bragging in any shape and form and maybe making fun of myself, but there's probably no one else that has done what I've done, not from like a height level, just from like a weird, like different things I've done. I graduated and I got lucky. So I broadcasted high school sports when I was in high school. And I had met the sports director at this little tiny radio station in a high school, hooked me up with a kid who was still in high school and he was broadcasting for Stanford. This was at the very beginning of streaming. So I remember when I was at Syracuse, we would stream a few things, and that was like unheard of. But Stanford was like the first school to broadcast everything, and Stanford still has 35 varsity sports. So right out of college, I was broadcasting for Stanford. I was actually working in a mall. I was a videographer. And then over the years, broadcasted all different types of sports, all different types of places, minor league baseball. The things I've done that have been a little bit different than, if you're watching this and play-by-play, you're kind of like, well, yeah, whatever. Is I've done a lot of stats. So I do stats for ESPN. I work a lot with Dave Fleming, who was the broadcaster at Stanford. So when I started working at Stanford, I worked on the football crew. I would do mostly stats. Every now and then I do an interview or do sidelines. And then, so talent stats for ESPN, for Dave and other broadcasters, including Mike. Shout out to Mike again. I swear he didn't pay me per shout out.
Per mention.
For mention. But I taught a class at Academy of Art. So in 2011, I started broadcasting for them as Division II school. They just cut sports, which stinks because I had a lot of friends there. But I started teaching there. And then my full-time job now is I work for NBA2K, which is, it's not really a broadcast job. It's not really a sports job. It's a video game job that happens to deal with sports and broadcasting. But I've done just so many different things that, I'm the type of person that I probably have some sort of undiagnosed something in my brain and I need to do different things. I would get bored if I did the same thing every day. So it's been a lot of fun to do different things and kind of have a different background where I've been on air a ton, but I've also been behind the scenes and then writing and then just like different ways to think about how to disseminate information is the best way to put it.
Another recurring theme that's come up in the podcast, Tim, is be willing to do any job. You talked about doing sports, and the next thing you're doing your interviews, you're doing play-by-play, you're doing streaming for Stanford, basically out of school because streaming was in its infancy 20 years ago. So I love that. Okay, I'm dying to ask you about NBA2K. I've fallen off my video game playing days a little bit. Every once in a while, I bust out the old school Super Nintendo for a mental health day. But tell me, first off, how you ended up in this gig and what your role is and what you do.
Well, it is the ultimate what the heck story. I've told it. I actually told it yesterday to somebody. Beyond the play-by-play, I would do stats and do just like different odd jobs. And I was working at a gymnastics event, and I was like doing stats. This was in 16 or 17, and I was working on my chart. So for Stanford, I broadcast women's basketball, which has been really special for me. I got to do a national championship game.
Yeah.
Cut the net at the Final Four, or cut the net to get to the Final Four. They let me go up there and cut the net. That was like an all-time.
They let the play-by-play guy cut a piece of the net? That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I missed. So what happened was, before I get into this other story, Stanford played in Las Vegas, and they played in the Pac-12 championship. And the team was going back on a charter. I had a commercial flight, so I had to run up back to my room, and I was in a change and shower. And a couple people texted me, including one of my buddies. His name's Savino. He's an engineer, Savino Rubalcaba, and he's an engineer in the Bay Area for sports. And he texted me like, "Where the bleep are you?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, they called you up over the PA to cut the net. Oh. And I was like, "What? They called me up?" So I missed it, and it was embarrassing because I'm on the floor with all the team and the coaches, and I like come out of and the players and the coaches like, "Where were Tim?" I'm like, so Stanford, what was this 2022? They won the Pac-12. That was a conference, right?
Yeah.
It's a sports fan joke because the Pac-12 doesn't.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Right. But I grew up with.
It's so hard to keep up with it now.
You need a PhD, and it's bizarre now. Stanford and Syracuse are in the same league, but so at the Spokane, they won the regional, got to go to the Final Four, and I got to go up and cut the net. So anyways, so I was working this gymnastics event. I was working on my chart for Stanford women's basketball, and a guy came next to me, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, this is I'm working on my chart for basketball." And he goes, "Oh, I work for NBA2K, and we got to add a new announcing crew for the G League." And essentially, I think they didn't want to pay. They wanted to kind of have like a lesser people than Kevin Harlan and Brian Anderson, because those guys are so busy. I don't think they have the time. So I ended up sending in my clips, and I ended up doing voiceover for the video game. And then this is me being, if you know me at all, you kind of know that I can kind of say things before I think, or just kind of, I'm totally unedited. I'll just kind of, sometimes I got to stop myself, but I was reading the copy, right? So if you're recording for a video game, people think you're kind of calling the action on a screen, but you're really just reading off of, there's different scripts with, assigned meanings, and you're kind of just reading a teleprompter. And there was some writing in there that I was like, I don't get this. Like a play-by-play guy wouldn't say this. So they go, and I was trying to be nice about it. And they said, "Well, would you ever want to write for us?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I started writing for them part-time, and they brought me on full-time a couple of years ago. So, essentially people understand the voiceover part, but that's about 5 to 10 hours a year. Most of what I do is writing, kind of some quality control, stuff with talent, kind of helping pick new talent, helping cultivate talent, sitting in on sessions with talent, seeing what they like, kind of from a bunch of different perspectives, formatting perspective, or writing they like, or do we start writing like this or not? Writing games, we had the Jordan mode, the Kobe mode, where we recreated some of their biggest moments in games for my MJ. It was so cool watching. So part of my research was watching those games back.
Okay.
And I got to say, Syracuse guy, I'm Marv Albert, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was watching him call Jordan finals games in the mid-90s. I've never heard a better broadcaster in my life. So a lot of different things. Mostly, I'm in the audio department. So anything, if you play the game and you hear anything, that's our department, and that's what I do. And it's a lot of fun, a lot of problem solving, which I appreciate. And it's a great company to work for. I really love working there.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper on this, because I'm fascinated by this, and I'm sure a lot of our sports folks and gamers and both are too. So first off, when you're reading the copy, when you're starting off, does it get monotonous because it's like 8 different intonations of the same thing, and then and then I guess that question extends to the writing too?
Yeah, that is a great question. We have a bunch of different systems that we use, and when we're recording, they try to kind of mix it up a little bit. So you got to be careful too, because a lot of the stuff we have is proprietary.
Sure.
And I I think we mix it up. That's part of why I sit in with
because you've seen the other side of it.
Yeah, because I'm one of the, we only have like maybe 2 or 3 people on our crew that have seen the recording side and then the writing side. So those sides kind of work together. It is a challenge though. How do you mix it up and not make it monotonous? Recording for 2 hours, most of our sessions are 2 to 3 hours. That is a very long time to sit down and record. We'll have breaks. When do we take breaks? How do we have the high energy stuff, the low energy stuff? It's a great question because we perfected it, not perfected it, but we're trying to perfect it. And I think my boss, who is been one of the kind of the pioneers in video game audio, it's a big point that we've tried to do the best we can on, because the other thing too is, for me, getting my time is not that big of a deal. I'm a full-time employee, but for Brian Anderson, Kevin Harlan, Greg Anthony, all of our Doris Burke, Stan Van Gundy, these people are super busy, and getting 2 hours is a long time. So we have to be as efficient as we can and not waste a second of their time.
So those are the folks that you're doing the writing for, and it helps that you've been behind the mic and you can say, okay, well, you can figure out this is how they would say it, and probably I'd imagine you're watching their games and knowing some of their cadence and the way they speak and call a game too. Absolutely,
you have to write differently for different people, and I think that's one of the challenges that is with my job. You can't write the same for everyone, and you have to kind of. I like to in my head or out loud to read every line that I do. The other thing that I've noticed that can help people at home that are not necessarily writing voiceover, but writing in general, is I love to write stuff as almost as fast as I can and come to my head and put it. Like I say, put it on ice. Save it, close the document, go do something else, and then come back a few hours or the next day. I think for me, for writing, that has been the number one thing that's helped me, is writing almost stream of consciousness, writing creatively, and then getting into the editing, making 2 separate processes and not doing it all at once.
You're the Taylor Swift of NBA2K.
I wish I was.
I think, no, even back to like college, I think about having to write a paper and writing it the night before and then coming back to it to read it and revise it the next morning if I wasn't pulling an all-nighter after Fagan's to get it written, Yeah,
thankfully Fagan's is still open. That was when I was back there, I was definitely on Marshall Street, and it was sad to see just Fagan's alive of everything that was there. But that's a great point too, because I was not. I'd always to look back, and I prioritized radio and Z89 and Citrus TV, just kind of ahead of schoolwork so much that a lot of times I was writing stuff. A lot of times I was on the road. There was one point between Citrus and Z where we call it crossover season. So like in March, you have lacrosse and basketball going on.
Yeah.
I was gone my junior year. I remember once 5 straight weekends calling games for lacrosse or basketball. So yeah, it's kind of funny looking back.
So you went back to campus, and it was pretty much the first time since you graduated you've been back in January?
I had been a couple of times. I'd been when I graduated. The year after I graduated, I went once when I was living here. Then I was broadcasting baseball in Virginia, and I drove up once. I went for a bachelor party. That was really fun in 2014. And then I went with Stanford. They played Syracuse mid to late January, and it was pretty amazing. I walked just all around. I went to Z89. I met. Shout out to the sports director, Adam. Adam Hipsky was the sports director. I got hooked up with him through, various people, and he was able to show me around the sports department. I got to meet tons and tons of students. I walked over to Citrus. It was open. I talked to a bunch of students there. At the game, I talked to some students. So it was pretty amazing. It was really sad to see Kimmel had closed, and that whole block is like razed.
Yeah, I think it's going to be dorms now, which is just wild. I mean, because Kimmel kept us all alive when it was across the street, whether you graduated in 85 or 2009.
Yeah. Yeah, Kimmel was amazing. So that was sad to see that's gone. It was very different. I think, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it felt very much more commercialized. Marshall Street, not that many of those mom and pop places like Chipotle,
a lot of national chains, yeah.
That's just kind of reality. It's like I was telling people, it's almost like a metaphor for society, what's happening all around us. But it was pretty special to go back.
I just shudder at the fact that students will not go to Acropolis at 3 a.m. and hear, "You want slice?"
Yeah. or yeah, any of those places. I guess Cosmos closed a long time ago. I loved Cosmos.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
Best wings.
I went to practice, and then the team was going to go to the athletics department. And I just wanted to walk back to the hotel, and I went to I was like, oh, maybe I'll have a beer or two, or maybe more than that. At Fagan's, and it wasn't even open at like 7:30, and it doesn't open till late. So it was. I guess it's different now with the Uber. The Uber, I sound so old. The Lyft, the
Yeah,
social.
because you go down. You can, if you are drinking, which I don't think students drink as much as we did back in the day. But if you are drinking, you can Uber down to Armory, and there's a million bars down there.
Yeah, like I went to Armory, like when school was out, I would stay a little bit later to cover sports or come early. And Marshall Street was shut down. Everyone says Chuck's. I miss Chuck's. And I wore a Chuck's t-shirt. So I have my the yellow touch Chuck's t-shirt. I was debating between that and this. I thought this was a little bit more appropriate, but I wore it to the bar, and I had like 3 or 4 people come up to me and be like, "Hey, how can I buy? Like, where can I buy? How can I get this shirt?" I'm like, "You got to go into a time machine and go back to the thing in 2009." And the guys at Fagan's loved it, but it's just kind of different. And but it was really cool to see the station was the same, and talking to students that it is kind of the same vibes, and that part, it kind of seems it stayed kind of the same.
As a play-by-play man and storyteller, you have weaved this together wonderfully. Before we start to wrap up, I'll ask you, lessons that you learned at JPZ. Obviously, you had a lot of time, a lot of hours as the sports director on the road doing play-by-play. What are some of the things you learned at JPZ that have served you well in your career to this point, Tim?
There's so many things. I had never really thought about it until recently. Is when I was 19, I was like in charge of like 12, 14, 15. Like I was like, wow, I can't believe I can't even do. I have 2 kids. I'm really struggling being in charge of them. But I think that was one thing. The normal play-by-play, being on the air. I think everyone kind of, if you're listening to this, you kind of understand that. The one thing that I really learned that I didn't think about was how to act around a team. So the main things that I did was we did a little bit of women's lacrosse. Maybe my freshman year, we did like select games. We went back to a full schedule, and there was a coach, Lisa Miller, and I got to know her. And she first was kind of pissed that we weren't doing their games as much anymore. But eventually, when I talked her down, the athletic department let us travel with the team, mm-hmm. which is a very big deal. So my sophomore year, we got to travel around a team. So how do you talk to coaches? How do you interact with players? How do you build relationships? I love to talk to coaches. That's one of my favorite things about play-by-play, maybe my favorite, because I'll talk to a coach, especially it's Stanford. I know a lot of the coaches really well, and then I've gotten to know different coaches. But I'll talk to a coach for half an hour, and like 5 minutes of it will be for air. Like 25 minutes of it will be off the record.
But you're building relationships too.
Yeah, you build relationships. One of my favorite stories was we did a game at Colgate. We did it with shout out to Joel Gadet, who was my year, who's a longtime Division I broadcaster. We came back. We were on a bus with the players, and we got to become friends with a lot of lacrosse players, similar age. And I was traveling with the team, and randomly, like they had the house across the street from the house that I lived in. But we went to this pizza place, and Lisa was really funny. She was older woman, and maybe not older, I don't know. But the team had just won. They're in a good mood, and everyone's eating pizza. And the place was called Ye Old Pizza Pub. It's between Hamilton and Syracuse. I bet you it's still there. And it was like straight out of the 1960s, or somewhere like when we were kids, we would go to like a pizza party.
Yeah.
He goes, congrats on the win. And everybody, we're going to get some pictures. And the women are going, yeah. And she goes, of water. And then she was like, but and like at the table with me, her, the assistant coaches, and like the women's administrator, we'll be having pictures of beer. And she just brought a couple pictures of beer for us. So traveling with the team, and then Gary Gate, who's the men's lacrosse coach, he got hired. I got to know the women's basketball staff really well when I was there, especially the head coach, Quentin. And, just getting to know relationships, I think that really helped me. Being around so many different people, it's crazy. Like, I'm not, if you know, like, I'm not, there's a lot of people that are like in sports broadcasting. Syracuse people have this reputation because there's so many of us, and it could be a little, cheer, rah, rah, or just like, hey, I went to Syracuse. And I usually don't tell people that unless they ask me. or I'll bring it up like because it's just I understand our reputation. But when I was a senior, our sophomore class at Z89, we had Mike, who's on ESPN, Kevin Brown, who's on ESPN, Baltimore Orioles, really, really, really good. Alex Perlman, who's on ESPN, really great announcer. Andrew Allegretta is the Vanderbilt announcer. He's an awesome announcer. He's a year younger than me. I can't even, I feel bad because I'm like forgetting people. We had taught, my year, Danny Parkins did a little bit of play-by-play, did mostly talk. He's on Fox Sports 1. Nick Wright did a bunch of stuff at Z89. He's on Fox Sports 1. He had his own talk show in the summer, and I think during the weekends, John Jastrzemski, great guy. He was with the Ringer forever. So it is wild looking back, how many people are on, national TV and, just how many high level talents, I had a guy who was in the same, minor league as I was in, and he's now a Major League Baseball announcer, was asking me about Syracuse. Like, how are there so many people from Syracuse that are in Broadway? Like, what is going on at these stations? And I said, well, I got a bunch of great guidance from people. And by the time, and then I was, giving hopefully okay guidance to people or, steering them in the right, not screwing up their careers. But, by the time you're out, you're like, it's beyond professional. Like when I was first broadcasting stuff, I was like, damn, when I was in school, it was a lot more professional. And I think, iron sharpens iron or whatever you want to say. I think that's the biggest thing I got from Z89 was beyond how to build relationships and be on a broadcast was kind of how to be around people that were really good and be competitive in a friendly way though too. I think when I was sports director, one of the things that I really tried to do was make things friendly and not competitive because things can get really competitive and nasty and not friendly in that place. The other thing that I really liked to do was do things that were different. I broadcast the first ever ice hockey game at Syracuse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was, we were at the top. So there's, ice hockey rink. I'm not a huge ice hockey guy. I just know a little bit about it.
I've always been told, and it seems to me that of the four major sports, that hockey's the hardest to call because it's so fast.
By far, because it's fast and they're changing people constantly.
Yeah, you got a minute of ice time and you're off to the next line. Yeah.
And it's hard to identify them. So it's the first ever game. The jerseys are supposed to have numbers on the sides and the front. They don't. Like the jerseys are just like, everything was coming together really late for them. And they're skating towards us. So I had no idea. I'd never seen this team before. Never called a hockey thing before, a hockey game before. And somebody comes down, they score 7 seconds into the game. And I'm just like, and I think I identified the person correctly, but I said like ball instead of puck.
Oof.
Just like things like that I knew were going to happen. But just doing things differently and kind of trying to think outside the box. And how can you, that's the thing I loved about Z89 is that we were kind of left to our own devices and you could do what you wanted to do. And that's kind of what was most fun for me.
Before we wrap up, Tim, is there anything you wanted to talk about that I have not asked you about?
One thing that I always thought was pretty amazing was just how much pride everyone took in everything. And, to tie it all together, there are different people that have been involved with the station, not involved. For me, I had not been involved. I had no idea what's going on with Z89. And not because I didn't like Z89, because I love the place, but I'm out here on the West Coast. I always wish I could go to the banquet, but I never can. It's so far.
Yeah. One of my best friends, Matt Alsigno, who just is a Hall of Famer, he lives in San Francisco, and he actually told me he can get to Tokyo faster than Syracuse.
It's like 11 hours to Tokyo. Yeah, there's a stop. But just going back there, I would suggest if anybody there at home is thinking you can or can't go, I would suggest going back because it really felt like home. I tell people like I grew up in San Mateo. I live in Oakland. I love living in Oakland. My wife and I picked to live in Oakland. I went to Syracuse and I've worked so much at Stanford. Those are the places that feel like home to me. And when I went back to Syracuse, it felt really like home. I saw some people at the Dome I hadn't seen in a long time. Up in the rafters, I saw some like names of people that I covered when I was friends with in college who now got their names up there. The fact that I got to have time with head coaches and I really hope. I talked to a lot of students there, and I was curious about things that were going on. And the one thing that was kind of sad to me is almost like the NIL and rev sharing is kind of put like almost like a wall between the students and the athletes. When I was there, the students and the athletes, like like some athletes might have been in my house for like a party a few times, like
Sure.
things like that would happen. Whereas now with the transfer portal, people constantly in and out. It's kind of sad for me that you can't build the relationships that you could before. But anyways, to get to my point, I was making before. Sorry, I would suggest making it there because it was really special for me, and to do a game in the Carrier Dome, or pardon me, the JMA Wireless Dome.
It's the Carrier Dome.
The Carrier Dome.
It's the Carrier Dome, and by the way, it's still Twitter.
Yeah, it's still Twitter. Elon. I'm in Elon country. It's Teslas everywhere.
Yeah, I bet.
That's a story for another day. That'll be on the G89 Politics podcast. No, I'm kidding.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that's why I'm in sports, politics, news. I can't. My brain can't handle that stuff. But it was really special to go back and look at I sat there for like an hour because a lot of the games I did, stuff I haven't listened to, or maybe never listened to, was still there, and I was like trying to get it back to me on Dropbox. So definitely make it out if you can. It was pretty amazing to see what they've done, and it is pretty special that that it's a radio station that's running that is, as far as I know, when I was in school, we might have had an advisor or a teacher. I don't know. I never met them. It's not being like shade on those people, but it is entirely run by students, and it's a pretty special thing. Working with students I have and seeing students at different places, getting to know students at different places, like it is a very Syracuse thing that you can have an entire station that's the hardest station to program, and it's hard to broadcast live events that is just run by students. So that was pretty cool for me to see. One funny story I'll tell real quick is I went on a road trip with a couple of friends to see the NCAA tournament in Memphis, Tennessee, and then we drove back. So Syracuse in the Sweet 16, they played Oklahoma, and Blake Griffin was there and just got their behinds kicked. But we were driving back. One of my favorite things when I used to work there, I probably wasn't supposed to do this, was there were like songs I liked, and I would put it in next gen. So when I was like getting in my car or leaving station, I could listen to the.
We won't tell your program director past statute of limitations.
Well, so what I did was I called the station and pretended like I was Alex Silverman, and lied to whoever the poor DJ was and say, I love the song Poker Face.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, this is Alex Silverman. You got to this is Poker Face. It's like the biggest song in the world. You got to put on Poker Face. Get on Poker Face. So then they put on Poker Face. So that was a funny, one of many stories that were from my time there.
Does Alex know this story?
I don't know if he does.
He does now.
Yeah. I saw him at a wedding. Yeah, I saw him at a wedding a few years ago. That was cool to see him. And, sorry, I keep on saying the last time I'll say too, is it is kind of incredible too. I've made a lot of friends in broadcasting. I've worked at Stanford, I have great friends there. ESPN, I have some really close friends. There is nothing like being in college, getting to broadcast with all your friends and work with your friends. That was pretty special, and I do miss that.
There's a certain camaraderie, and like I don't know about you, I wasn't in a frat at Syracuse. I had JPZ. That's all I needed was those are my people.
Yeah, I had Z, and then right next door was Citrus, and it was fun to go into Citrus, and they're doing all-nighters and see what they're doing. I was not in a frat either. That would have been bad for me on multiple fronts.
Would have had less time to go out and travel and call games. Tim Swartz, class of 2009, been an absolute pleasure sitting down again and hear your story, and thank you for being part of the podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, this is all really awesome. A lot of things I haven't thought about in a while, and it was great. I was on the air. They interviewed me at Z89 when I was there a couple months ago, so pretty fun to get back this in the same year. So thanks so much, guys.
All right.
The WJPZ at 50 podcast is created entirely by the staff and alumni of the world's greatest media classroom.
It's hosted by John Jag Gay, class of 2002.
Imaging by Maureen Cooper, class of 1999.
And Ed Lacombe, class of 1985.
Podcast artwork by Marty Dundix, class of 2001.
Follow WJPZ at 50 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube,
or wherever you're listening right now.